And, without further ado, I am going to let Tony and Rakesh speak, I think, especially because what we've seen is coal has got many meanings for trade unionists, but we also know that there have been the struggle of the miners in the 80s and the damage is done to those communities. Therefore, as trade unionists, it's quite a difficult topic to talk about. And we need to approach it in a very, cautious way, but also a firm way because of the climate emergency. And make sure we convince fellow trade unionists that it is now okay not to support coal. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Tony and Rakesh to give us a bit of an overview about where we are with this project. Which stage are we at? What campaigning is taking place, community engagement. They'll touch on the Green Jobs Summit that took place, and some of you may have taken part of this. Once this is finished, we'll take a few questions, comments, and hopefully with those who can remain longer, we will then have a little bit of an action planning session to see what next steps we can take as trade unionists to obviously get more people involved and reach out to others and some ideas we may have for the next, few months. Because although we expect the project to be approved imminently, it may take longer, and if it's approved, the battle only commences. So, don't know, Tony and Rakesh, which one of you is going to start?
I think it'll probably be me. Thanks, Clara. What we're going to do is I'm going to spend a few minutes giving an overview of the project, what we think of the problems are with it, and talk a little bit about some of the jobs arguments. And then Rakesh is going to talk to you about the Green Jobs Summit, which we ran in Cumbria a few months ago. So I'm going to try and share a screen. Let's see if I can make this. Oh, I can't share my screen, Clara.
I've just made you co-host. Sorry, Tony, I meant to do that before. So you should be able to know.
No problem. Can you see that briefing? There's something that says West Cumbria Coal Mine Trades Union briefing. Can you see that? Right. Okay, here we go. So where is it? It's in it's in West Cumbria. And you can see on the map on the right-hand side, it's outside that, for those of you who don't know Cumbria, this isn't in the Lake District National Park. This is on the coast, right near Whitehaven, just south of Whitehaven, and a few miles north of the Sellafield nuclear processing plant. That's where the mine is. What's being proposed? Well, West Cumbria Mining is proposing the UK's first new deep coal mine for 30 years. And this is going to produce about 2.75 million tonnes of coal a year until 2049. And it's really important to note, this is coking coal. This is coal exclusively for the steel industry. This is not coal to use in power generation or anything like that. This isn't coal which is going to be put into making electricity. And West Cumbria Mining claim that they will create 500 new jobs. They say what they're claiming is that there's going to be a continued high demand for coal for steel production for at least another 30 years, carry on until 2050. And they're saying that we don't need to actually look at the climate impacts of burning the coal, because the coal is going to replace imports from the US. And so it's carbon neutral, isn't it? And the mine itself is going to be zero emissions, because they're going to cut some of the emissions and offset the rest. And they claim it'll create jobs for local people. The problem with some of that is that a lot of the jobs they claim you need skills. And there hasn't been a mine operating in West Cumbria since the last mine shut down in 1976. So it's a fair while since there was employment in mining in West Cumbria. What's the Friends of the Earth's key arguments against the mine? Firstly, it's not compatible with climate change. Secondly, there's no long-term demand for the coal. We need a steel industry, but the steel industry needs to and is moving towards greener forms of production. Excuse me. And thirdly, it's not the right way to create jobs. West Cumbria desperately needs investment. It desperately needs jobs, but jobs in a fossil fuel industry is not the right way to do it. So on climate change, the context, iron and steel, the industry globally produces 11% of all of global carbon emissions. If the island steel industry was a country, it would be the third highest emitter in the world after China and the US. And the steel industry is a big, you can see it's a big contributor to total UK industrial emissions. And the majority of this is from the two blast furnace steel plants, British Steel at Scunthorpe and Tata Steel at Port Talbot. The annual emissions from burning the coal, if West Cumbria Mining are allowed to produce 2.78 million tons of coal a year, the carbon that would produce will be equivalent to equivalent to 2% of the UK's annual carbon emissions. This is a big place. This is a big impact. And that's what the Climate Change Committee, the government's official advisors, have said. This mine would have an appreciable impact on the UK's legally binding carbon budgets. Basically what they mean is if you open this mine, then other sectors are going to have to make bigger cuts. And it would also increase global carbon emissions. This is bad news in climate terms. Is there a market for the coal? One of the things which the West Cumbria Mining like to make you believe, and which the mine's backers like to make you believe, is that this is coal for the UK steel industry. Yes, it is. Some of this coal is going to go to the UK steel industry, but a maximum of 13%. That's split equally between, 6.5% going to Port Talbot, 6.5% going to British Steel at Scunthorpe. But the problem is British Steel say that the sulfur content of the coal is probably too high for them to use. So this could be only 6.5% of the coal which this mine produces being used in the UK. The remainder is going to be exported to Europe, basically the European Union plus Turkey. And how big that future market is, depends on how the steel industry decides to decarbonize. Are they going to carry on using blast furnaces and fit carbon capture and storage? Are they going to move towards more use of things called electric arc furnaces? Are they going to recycle more steel? Are we going to reduce steel demand? How we do that is really going to determine what the market is for this coal. And the European steel industry is moving fast away from coal. 3/4 of the blast furnace capacity in the EU is going to reach the end of its operational life this decade. And the companies are going to have to make a decision about whether or not they carry on with it. And the industry's customers are demanding greener steel. The car industry, the second biggest consumer of steel of the steel produced, they're saying we want greener steel. And the European Commission are putting forward proposals which is going to weaken the business case for blast furnaces. And we're already seeing the steel industry making announcements about moving away from blast furnaces, a clear shift away from coal. Decisions are being made now, which is going to affect the plants which are reaching the end of their operational life before 2030. They're moving away from coal. The International Energy Agency says if we want to be on target to meet net zero by 2050, then we don't need any new coal mines. We don't need any new extensions of existing coal mines. So West Cumbria Mining is looking to open a mine just as the market for its coal is declining. And so there's a risk that the mine is going to become a stranded asset with no market for its coal. And that clearly means there are implications for the jobs which West Cumbria Mining might create. As for the UK steel industry, nobody is arguing that the UK, about the fact that the UK needs a competitive domestic steel industry. We absolutely agree with that. Steel is going to be a key part of the move to net zero, whether it's building wind turbines or whatever. We need steel. We need a steel industry. But if we want a competitive domestic steel industry, it's going to need to decarbonize. But the government is hedging its bets between carrying on using coal with carbon capture and storage and using hydrogen. But they've been told by the Climate Change Committee that if we wanted to, we could get rid of coking coal use in steel making completely within 15 years. And there may be no use of domestic coking coal beyond 2035. Again, is this mine good? That's only halfway through the mine's projected lifetime. So is this mine going to become a stranded asset? Will there be impacts on jobs? And so even if they do, I'll skip over this. Basically, this is the Materials Processing Institute, which is a world-renowned industry body, saying even if you do put CCS, carbon capture and storage, on a blast furnace and carry on using coal, what the problem is that risks you stagnating further development. And so the industry, if the government goes down the line of fitting carbon capture and storage onto a blast furnace, then is the UK steel industry going to be competitive? So the European steel industry is moving away from coal, and it's a fair chance that the UK steel industry will move away from coal. So the market is disappearing. One question that's keeping on coming up at the moment is about Russian coal. In the current context, people are saying, the arguments, people in favor of the mine are saying, we need to build this mine to replace Russian coal. And it's not the complete truth. The UK does import coal from Russia, but most of it is thermal coal to be used in power stations. Steelmakers don't just use one form of coal in a blast furnace, they use a different mix of coals. And the sort of coal that is coming from, that we will get from Cumbria, is not like the Russian coal. It's nearest, the mine the sort of coal it's going to be competing with is coal from the US East Coast, and even West Cumbria mining admit that. They're looking to take market share, not away from Russia, they're looking to take market share away from the US. And so Cumbrian coal is not a replacement for Russian coal. It will be a replacement for US coal. And it doesn't mean no imports. We're still going to carry on importing at least 80% of the coal we need for steel. If we carry on using coal for steel making, we'll probably still be carrying on importing 75 to 80% of that, because of this need to have a different blend of coals. Energy independence doesn't just mean getting off gas, it means moving away from coal use as well. Green jobs, last point for me, it doesn't have to be jobs or the environment. It can be, and it must be both. We've got to be looking at the two working together. Cumbria, and in particular West Cumbria, needs new jobs, but these don't have to be in fossil fuel industries. Friends of the Earth's line is that the UK needs a green industrial revolution. Jobs in energy efficiency, solar power, offshore wind, low carbon heating, and even more so now, as we're trying to reduce our reliance on gas. And there is big potential for green jobs in Cumbria. The local government association talks about the potential for 6,000 green jobs in Cumbria by 2030, and nearly 600 of them could be in Copeland, the area where the mine would be built. So where are we now? The inspector of them, it's all got a bit slowed down. We're a few months behind schedule. The inspector who ran the planning inquiry last September is still writing his report. We expect that will go to the government this month. The decision, therefore, from Michael Gove can be expected in the next few months, but he can't announce it. There's going to be, the pre-election period before the local elections means he can't announce it between the end of March and the end of the first week in May. So we think it's probably going to be into May after the local elections. But the decision, whichever way it goes, might not be the end. If Michael Gove gives permission for the mine, then we will have to think about whether or not we can legally, Friends of the Earth and SLAC, the local campaign group that we're working with, can legally challenge that decision. We can't take it through the planning process anymore. It would have to be a legal challenge. And in the same way, if Michael Gove didn't give permission for the mine, then West Cumbria Mining might decide that they want to legally challenge, and we would have to think about how we got involved in that. So that's it for me. I will stop screen sharing and I'll pass over to Rakesh, who's going to talk a little bit more about the Green Job Summit, which we ran in Cumbria a few months ago.
Hi everyone. So we ran a Green Job Summit in, I think it was October, and Martin was there. So it followed on from a Friends of the Earth report in May 2021, where we studied the impact of the pandemic on young people. At that time in May 2021, there was 500,000 young people that were out of work, and we expected that figure to grow as the furlough scheme was discontinued. The study was commissioned by Transition Economics to identify how to create green jobs quickly and to identify the scale of funding needed. As a result of this report, we started holding green job summits around the country. And on the basis, so for the Cumbria one, we based it on the Cumbria Action for Sustainability report, which again, they identified that there could be 9,000 jobs created in Cumbria, 4,500 of them in West Cumbria. And those figures don't include nature-based jobs or more jobs in education and things like that. They reckon they can create the jobs within the next 15 years, as Cumbria wants to become the first county in Great Britain to go net zero, and their target is 2037. There's a partnership of 80 plus organizations called the Zero Carbon Partnership that are pushing for that agenda. At the Green Job Summit, we had people from Friends of the Earth, local councillors, the local enterprise partnership, Cumbria Action for Sustainability, Martin in his role as the Unison Cumbria Environment Officer, the Lakes College Cumbria Green Investment Project, Net Zero Cumbria, Unite Environment Task Force, and National Educational Union. A common theme throughout the summit was that there was a need for investment in jobs in Cumbria. As a result of the Green Job Summit, we created an open letter, which was signed by 31 organisations based in or covering Cumbria and almost 300 local residents. And that letter we sent to Boris Johnson. Thanks.
Well, thanks so much, Tony and Rakesh, for giving us an overview in a short time. I have shared a number of links. Some of them are also in the motion pack, but you can watch the video recording of the Green Job Summit. There is, presentation, breakout discussion summaries, and a link to the initial report as well. So we'll make sure we circulate those links and Tony's slides as well to everybody. So now we're going to take some time to take any questions you may have and comments. And I'm going to start with one that was put in the chat by Don. So who are West Cumbria Mining? Do we know? Are they a front for a global fossil corporation? And I don't know if that's a question for Tony or Rakesh. Can you answer that?
Yeah, I suppose that's one for me. They're not a global, it's not a front for a global fossil fuel corporation. They are a company, they are owned by, you can trace it back. There's West Cumbria Mining, there's West Cumbria Mining Holdings Limited, and you go back a few stages via a fund, a private, basically, if you work it all back, they're owned by a private equity company based in the Cayman Islands. You go back to that. Yeah.
Surprise.
You go back a few stages via the Cayman Islands, via Hong Kong, via Singapore, and things like that. But it's a company called EMR Capital Resources who are based in the Cayman Islands.
Thanks, Tony. And the sort of ownership and funding of all those projects are often very complicated, but end up often in tax havens, don't they? I'm just checking if anybody else have got a question. Raise your hands, and I've got Martin.
Yeah, I'm not as clued up as I ought to be about what the green or greener alternatives for steel making are. So we've mentioned hydrogen reduction and arc furnace technology. Are those things kind of currently in operation, or is this sort of something that is in development but it hasn't actually landed yet?
Right. There are two ways you can make steel, mainly primary steel, sort of new steel. One is using a blast furnace and coal and things like that, and you put the and that's the traditional way, if you like it, to make steel. The way in which we've all probably people will be aware of, that's been used, over the last few decades. There's another way which uses something called an electric arc furnace, which doesn't require the iron to be heated up, iron ore to be heated up to incredible temperatures to get rid of the oxygen and produce the iron. It's done in a solid form, and that typically uses something like hydrogen or gas as a reducer. But you can also use the electric arc furnace with scrap or recycled steel. And in all of these things, these alternate methods, it's not pie in the sky. It's not something that might come in 20 or 30 years' time. They're being used now, and the companies are moving towards them now. There's some companies in some of the big European-based companies are really starting to make these announcements now. I mean, if you think about it, ArcelorMittal, which is one of the world's biggest steel companies, have said they've got a plant which is going to be, by 2025, could be the world's first. The whole plant will be zero emissions. There'll be no emissions from producing the steel. Salzgitter, one of the big German companies, has said it's going to move completely to hydrogen and renewable-based steel making by 2033. SSAB, one of the Scandinavian companies, said it's going to move to pretty much eliminate fossil fuel emissions from its steel making by 2030. And that they've announced that a couple of months ago, and that's 15 years sooner than they originally intended to do it. So this is not pie in the sky future technology, which might happen, might not. It's in use now, and people are making these decisions now that they want to use this technology rather than coal.
Thanks.
And presumably, oh, sorry, Clara, if the hydrogen that would be used, presumably for the time being, that would tend to be blue hydrogen, but we can move towards green hydrogen, as if they bigged up electrolysis and so on to make
right. I mean, yeah, absolutely, Martin. The ideal is to have green hydrogen. Green hydrogen is produced by electrolysis of water, and if you're using renewable energy to power the process, then it's essentially zero. It's essentially zero emissions. You can have blue hydrogen, which comes from gas, or you can just use, the sort of plants that they're putting in for using hydrogen. They can be used with any blend of hydrogen from whatever source and gas. So we could potentially use gas. Some of the German plants were, until a month or two ago, planning to use gas. How they're changing that, in light of what's happening in Ukraine, I don't know, but it's still happening, and we can use blue hydrogen. You can use gas, and as the green hydrogen or other forms of hydrogen come on board, then yes, you can switch to that. So these things are happening, and they're happening now.
Thanks, Tony. And I think, technological sort of questions and details are always important, because we don't want to be caught up on those. So it just makes me think about a follow-up action is maybe to share a few resources about, this, what we've just discussed right now. And I don't know if somebody else has a question, but just on the technological side as well, that I think it's useful to get more resources to trade unionists about carbon capture and storage, because the TUC has been supportive of carbon capture and storage for a long time. Maybe like 10 years ago, we thought the technology would be ready by now, but my understanding is that we are still at a very early stage, sort of like test cases have happened, but at a very small sort of scale, and we're not ready to operate large industrial scale of CCS. So maybe just like very briefly, if that's your understanding as well, Tony, and maybe we can provide additional information for trade unionists.
Yeah, I'd be really happy to help with more information about CCS. We don't think it's the answer because it hasn't worked yet. There's no guarantee that it will work. If you're carrying, there's no guarantee what level of emissions you're going to be able to cut. There is no blast furnace anywhere in the world which has carbon capture and storage fitted on it. So it's a new technology for the steel industry. And the other thing is it just perpetuates fossil fuel extraction. You're saying that, you know, if you're allowing carbon capture and storage, even if you're capturing, say, you might be capturing 80% of the emissions, that means there's still 20% which is not being captured. But you're also saying that fossil fuel extraction, with all the other impacts which that has beyond climate, you know, the local health impacts and things like that, you're saying, effectively saying that's fine, carry on. So that's why we don't think that carbon capture and storage is the right answer.
Okay, no, that's great. And definitely maybe like for a FAQ or Q&A that we could add to as a resource for the motion would be useful. Claire, did you want to comment?
Yeah, thanks. So not very technical questions, I'm afraid, but just to for clarification. So I think we're in a position here where we've got 160, you know, existing skilled workers who would just continue on that, you know, on that extended contract, if you like. So I'm just wondering, from what you've said there, is that you're saying that the mine is likely to create 500 new jobs, but you're also saying that those skill sets don't actually exist anymore, because, you know, it's been quite some time now since anyone's actually had those skills in the area. So I guess one of the questions that I've got is, do you then feel, because we know here that out of the approximately 160 people, very few of those, the employees, very few of those are actually local. So I just wondered, you know, if this is, yeah, do you see those jobs coming from the local area?
I'm happy to have a go at this. Yeah, the last mine in West Cumbria, the Hague mine in Whitehaven, closed in 1986. So nobody's worked in mining in West Cumbria for 36 years. So people with skills are going to be not in the first flush of youth. How many of that, you know, it's not clear yet. The company seem to be a bit evasive about precisely what level of skills are going to be needed for which jobs. But they did say, you know, they have said in the past that some form of experience and skills will be needed for a lot of the jobs, particularly the underground jobs, which you can expect. So how many of the jobs will go to local people is unclear. They're claiming that they want to try and get, I think it's 80% of all the jobs going to local people. But whether that works out or not, that's an aspiration. Whether or not that works out, I don't know. And so it's really important. But, you know, on the jobs thing, we're really, you know, as has been said, you know, we need, you know, by Chris and by Clara and everything, the one thing we absolutely need is, in all the industries affected by this, in, you know, whether it's the fossil fuel industry, whether it's the steel industry, we need to make sure that we are keeping jobs, we are creating a just transition. And so, you know, that's absolutely critical. And we want to make sure that there are plenty of other jobs in West Cumbria. So, you know, as we're saying this, I think one of the reasons why local people in the area support the mine is because it's one of the few, and there is support in the local area for the mine. Not as much as it's, I think Rakesh will probably be able to talk to this, not as much as the support, not as much as the company would like to claim, but there are people there who do, in the West Cumbria, who do support the mine. And I think one of the reasons for that is because it's the only firm proposal on the table. They've got a proposal there that says we will create 500 jobs. And that does carry weight. We can talk about, and I think it's a job here for all of us, whether it's as green-oriented trade unions, NGOs, Cumbria County Council, local development people, local investors, or whatever, that you've got to move beyond figures in reports and lines on graphs. And they want to see money on the table and promises of jobs. And I think that's one of the challenges which we collectively, people who are arguing for a net zero transition, face. And of course, we can't do it on our own. That requires the government and councils and people to work with us. But we've got to make sure that we're moving beyond, you know, numbers in reports and lines on graphs.
Yes, thanks. We're going to move to last rounds of questions and comments. I see like Martin has put something in the chat, but John has got his hands up. So I'll take John and Then we'll look at Martin's question in the chat, and I had a quick question as well. Anybody else wanted to contribute? Chris, and so we're going to take John, then Chris, and then we'll come back to Martin and I, because I know Chris got to go, and Don as well. So John.
Thank you. I hope quite quick. You talked about it being a deep mine. Does that mean like what I think it does, where there's a shaft goes down? In other words, it's not open cast, and the implication of that is that it doesn't create so much obvious surface damage like by digging a damn great hole. Yeah,
that's
okay.
right. I mean, it's not like a pit. It's not.
Yeah.
They claim it's not going to be like one of the classic pit heads, which people remember college from the 80s would think of, but it's not like that. But it's minimal. It's less surface impact, say, than would have been at the Drawridge Bay coal mine in Northumbria, which we managed to stop, which would have just been basically peeling the surface off the earth over a couple of square kilometers.
The second one was, I think you've covered most of what I had on CCS for steel. Was it the same technology that's for power stations that basically has not been tested at scale and shown to work anywhere, as far as I know?
It's basically the same thing with the additional problem that's in a steel plant. There are a number of different, with a power plant, there's basically one place where the carbon emissions come out and you capture it from there. In a steel plant, there's lots of different places where it comes out. And also the problem is if you're putting that on somewhere like Port Talbot, you're putting carbon capture and storage on the blast furnaces at Port Talbot. There's nowhere nearby to store the carbon, and they're going to have to transport it up to the northwest England to find somewhere to store it. Okay,
that's great.
Thank you.
The 500 jobs, I suppose a question that had come up that may affect the way it's presented. I would suspect that they are not in any legally enforceable promise. No, they're just a vague aspiration. So that's a big point to make for a campaign, I would have said. And it'd be useful to know if we've got similar promises of jobs locally that come up in any kind of development, how often those come to pass. I'll give you one quick example, which I mentioned to Martin the other day. So sorry, Martin, I'm doubling up on you. But my son's studying A-level geography. Part of what he looks at is Media City in Salford, the redevelopment of the docks, Manchester docks, Salford docks, and the jobs in there. It's now in the A-level syllabus that only out of whatever many jobs, there's some ridiculously tiny amount actually went to people who live in the city of Salford. So just to illustrate that. And the final one was on the green jobs. I think you've alluded to this already a bit. I think in terms of a campaigning position, to appeal to local people to be campaigning in favour of an equivalent number of 500 good, well-paying green jobs, but concrete, as you say, not graphs, not you might get a job, not there's potential, but actually 500 jobs, specific jobs, even if they are specific jobs that haven't got the money behind them, the investment behind them, because you need the government to do something. It'd be better to say it's these 500 jobs that we think should be created instead. That's it. Thanks.
I'm not going to ask Rakesh or Tony to come back. I'm just going to take Chris and Don first. We'll round up the question and then you'll have a last chance to come back on all of those, if that's okay. So, Chris, do you want to come in? You need to unmute yourself. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. It was a brief comment and then a sort of fairly open question, in the sense that I think, a number of people have touched on the heart of the matter, in that opposing developments of this character, a bit like fracking on the outskirts of Blackpool, it immediately poses the question, doesn't it? In areas, deprived areas with low levels of employment, people looking for work, it's easy propaganda for the companies and local politicians to promote that. And the only antidote really is developing a coherent alternative, as others have said, that aren't just, you know, mathematical abstractions, but form an actual plan. And I just finished that. I think this is the open question, is that I'm fascinated by what you've been saying in this meeting. I try and keep up about this particular development, but I've learned a hell of a lot. But one of the things we are looking to develop from a Blackpool filed wire perspective is to develop the idea of a climate jobs pamphlet that we produced in the midst of the anti-fracking struggle that applies many of the sort of ideas in the original 1 million climate jobs. So I would very much welcome meeting up with a number of comrades here to explore the reports that you've referred to, and to perhaps just explore what work we can do together and how you may be able to help a number of us on the field to develop a similar plan to enlist political local support amongst unions, anti-fracking, councillors, etc. So it's a sort of open question that I would very much welcome a few of us being able to get together to explore sort of climate jobs alternatives in a bit more detail.
Yeah, thank you. So like suggestion of a bit of a collaboration across Lancashire and Cumbria, which I think quite a few people will be keen to follow up. So thanks, Chris. I had Don as well. You've put a number of questions in the chat. Do you want to go through them, Don?
Yeah, thanks, Clara. No, it was a question, really. I was just, well, as you and I well know, like Merseyside, for example, there are fossil fuel companies sponsoring directly or indirectly football clubs. So I'm just extending that thought slightly, knowing there's quite successful at the moment rugby league club in Whitehaven and a couple of others in Cumbria. Did we know whether there's any risk of West Cumbrian mining kind of insidiously worming its way into that club, or maybe even trying to win hearts and minds through local sport? Maybe no one here knows, but sorry, someone does know, right?
I can try and answer this.
Yeah, I think I'm just checking if that was the last soft question, and then I'll bring Rakesh and Tony. So we finish with round of questions for today anyway. So Rakesh, did you want to come in, and then Tony, maybe you want to say the last few words?
Yeah, I can come in for this, and if try and answer it. If not, Tony will take over. West Cumbria Mining don't have any money at the moment. They have laid off their staff, so they can't pay for any sponsorship, anything like that at the moment. And it seems that the people who are funding them are a bit nervous if the decision drags on any longer, they might pull out altogether. Those are the senses what we're getting. Tony?
Yeah, absolutely right. You know, Rakesh, you're absolutely right. West Cumbria Mining haven't got any money. They haven't got any money to pay their staff. They've just got enough money to get themselves through the public inquiry. You don't need to worry, Don. They're not going to sponsor any sports teams. You know, I don't think it'd be top of their priority list. Just one other quick point on the jobs thing in general. What I will do is, Clara, I will send to you a link. We didn't cover jobs in the public inquiry. That was covered by an expert witness for SLAC, the local campaign group. But they did a great demolition job of the West Cumbria Mining's jobs claims. And that's a publicly available document. So I'll dig out the link and send that to you, so that if you want to know how to dissect and demolish West Cumbria Mining's jobs claims, this will help you. That'll be your useful ammunition.
Excellent, thank you so much. So I'm aware that somebody had to leave already. I think Chris is leaving us. Is everybody else staying or going? Okay. Martin has got to go as well. Okay, well, thank you so much, Chris and Martin, and goodbye. And with the rest of the participants, if you just step behind a little bit, obviously we're not going to have breakout discussions because it's a small amount first, but I think we can just do a summary of maybe the next steps. So thanks, Chris. And okay, well, I guess that we can have a bit of a brainstorm of any ideas or suggestion that you may have given the briefing and the short discussion we had today. Of any other suggestions or ideas that we may be able to follow up on as a group. And to maybe kickstart things a little bit, I may just share a few thoughts. I mean, clearly, I would like your opinion about if it would be useful to maybe run another similar sort of briefing. We've also got the presentation, the recording, so we could easily run another briefing at a later stage. There may be new development as well this month. So that would be something that I would consider and welcoming opinions. Another thing is we've talked about a number of resources. I know Rakesh shared question and answer, but Tony have talked about new resources as well. So I will follow up this event by an email to all the participants, those who attended or couldn't attend, because we actually had 30 people registered for this event with a lower turnout with the additional resources. And I guess that another sort of suggestion that I have to kickstart the discussion and be interested to know, is there already any existing plans for the next step of the work that has been done in the Green Job Summit? You've got this report that seemed really interesting. You had the summit. But it seemed is there also sort of documents that are maybe simpler to engage with people about that, maybe a summary of the report or some sort of mini pamphlet, and any next step you already have, because I think that's where Trade Unionists could also contribute. So that's my initial thoughts, and I wonder if anybody else want to come in. John?
Yeah, I think it'd be really good to do another briefing, because I think we've clashed with another COP26 coalition tonight, unfortunately. So I don't know how many people will be on that, but that could well be the balance of the people who've not come tonight. So I'm sure that's useful. And the second one was just thinking about the plan that you've got, those green jobs ones, just following on from my previous thought, really. It'd be good to extract from that. I'd have thought maybe 500 actual jobs and kind of get some, if via local contacts, if you can get a relevant number of actual local people to say, yes, I want to do that job, because you've got actual people looking for actual jobs, and maybe they could be local people. I don't know if that would work, but it just seems more concrete to people and a much better campaign plan to lead it that way, rather than to lead it through people coming from all over the place to oppose it, although that might have to happen, and probably will happen, might need to happen. But if you lead it that way, I think that feels better to me and more persuasive.
Yeah, thanks, John. And if we can have trade unionists based in the area that can help with that work, I think it will be useful, because if you're going to do work with local people, we can't just rely on Friend of the Earth, capacity or other climate campaigns capacity. So that may be something we are able to help with, especially if you are local. Anybody else got any thoughts or maybe answers as well about if there's any follow-up plans with the Green Job Summit? Don.
Yeah, I don't know whether this is directly relevant, but I mean, obviously we're all aware of the rumblings in certain quarters of having to revive, or in the case of fracking, reinvent a UK fossil fuel industry for the first time because we have to, in inverted commas. And obviously there are very robust answers about why that is a ridiculous proposition. But I'm just wondering whether they're, because of those, the likelihood of those campaigns being re-energized, whether there are some kind of links that could be made between the Cumbrian campaign and any re-energized anti-fossil fuel campaigns that might have to start up again because of the government's stupidity.
Margaret, did you want to come in?
Yeah, can I just ask what is the what are the dimensions of the Cumbrian coal mine campaign at the moment? What is it, Tony and Rakesh?
I can answer that one. Or Rakesh, do you want to answer that one from the local perspective? And I'll
Okay.
It's not just me and Rakesh is the short answer, but the longer version. Rakesh will tell you about what's happening locally, and I'll tell you a bit about what's happening nationally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have local campaigners who are also people based in Whitehaven who are opposed to the mine. Unfortunately, because of the how strong the support seems to be locally, people make a lot of noise about it. A lot of people are scared to be open about their opposition. They're scared for their personal safety, basically. So we've had to kind of support people through that. But there is quite a lot of people who aren't necessarily based in Whitehaven itself, but based in West Cumbria that are against the coal mine.
Yeah.
And they are the people who have been leading on the work with us. We've tried at every opportunity to let them lead on what they want to do rather than us coming in and telling them that we want you to do this or the other. It's the way we try to do everything that we do anyway. So, and I don't know if you've ever worked with people from Cumbria, they wouldn't have it any other way anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So it's sort of becoming part of the culture wars in a small way, right? Focused in on Whitehaven, isn't it? And that is a worry, isn't it? Yeah. I don't know. Did anybody see the Simon Reeves 3-part documentary on Cumbria? And he did a very, very good piece on based around Whitehaven and then on looking at Sellafield, and it was very balanced and very good, and it it gave me some heart. Yeah.
Just on the national, then can I just a quick point on the national?
Yeah, I was going to bring
side
you in.
Yeah, thanks, Clara. On the nationally, Margaret, it's not just Friends of the Earth, so we're working, Rakesh has explained, we're working with loads of great people in Cumbria. Nationally, it's not just us. I've been down in London today handing in a petition at the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities alongside CPRE and Greenpeace, who are both working hard against this, and that's got just shy of 300,000 signatures. So this is, it's a big campaign. We've got, we've got groups like CPRE and Greenpeace opposed to it. All the big green NGOs are opposed to this as well. I'm working on a letter to Michael Gove from the bosses of the big NGOs, the green NGOs. So, Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace, CPRE, the Wildlife Trusts, all those sort of groups. And hopefully that will be going to Mr. Gove when the report lands on his desk. We're just getting the timing right. The Labour Party has said it won't build the mine. The Lib Dems are opposed to the mine. The Greens are obviously opposed to the mine. So you've got some of the local MPs off in favour. So Trudy Harrison, the local MP, the local Tory MP, is therefore Whitehaven is pro-mine. The MP, Mark Jenkinson, the MP for Workington, the next place up the coast, is pro-mine. They're both Tories. Tim Farron, the Lib Dem MP for South Lakes, is opposed to the mine. But the big thing that we had just before the public inquiry started was Neil Hudson, who's a Tory MP for Penrith and the Border, so one of the 5 Tory MPs, one of the 4 Tory MPs in Cumbria. He changed his position. He said, I've looked at it, I've looked at the climate impacts, I've been heard from my constituents, and I'm changing my view. I don't think we should build the mine. So there is significant national opposition to the mine. There is some significant local opposition to the mine, but the big pushback we're getting is around what we're hearing is that Michael Gove is being lobbied really hard by the Northern Research Group. They see this as being, you know, the Tory MPs from the north. They want jobs. They want things like this to be given the go-ahead because it creates jobs, and it can be seen to be creating jobs ahead of the 2024 general election. They're in favour of it. And that's why, you know, this is a planning issue, but it's a political decision. And I think we have made the climate case. I think the climate case on this is very strong. Jobs is going to be one of the key reasons, one of the key things that's going to sway Michael Gove.
Thanks, Tony. John, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, just triggered another couple of thoughts, really. One was, I was chatting to Martin about this issue a couple of weeks, maybe last week, and his view was that locally to Whitehaven, it's popular, but it's very unpopular, the wider Cumbria area. So I think that bears that out. Your more detailed knowledge bears that out. And it struck me that one of the things that's always unpopular with any form of development is often traffic. Is there an analysis of the traffic? I should imagine there will be with a planning application, but that's a big thing that often will turn people against something unless they've got the ability to build a rail line to it or something. But, you know, lorries rumbling down streets is a big one.
There is a rail line. There is a rail line which runs, it's interesting, the rail line runs about a mile away, mile and a half away. And they're going to be building an underground conveyor to this rail line. And then in a nice tranquil valley, they're going to build a rail loading facility, which is going to be about 75 meters long by 20 meters tall in a tranquil valley. And, you know, so the local visual impacts aren't so much around the mine. The mine itself is on a disused industrial site. The visual impacts and the transport impacts are going to be about the rail loading facility in a tranquil valley, you know, this huge monstrous construction. They're going to stick right next to the coast-to-coast footpath.
Sorry, John, I did put you on mute while
right.
Tony was speaking.
Sorry, I must be making a noise. Sorry about that. The other thing I suppose related to travel was, you know, might be again a campaigning thing to talk about the 500 jobs that are created, and if they're going to be people coming in, you can say they're going to be people driving from whichever place people in Whitehaven particularly dislike, you know. So you say, well, it's going to be all these horrible people coming from. There's horrible people coming from Lancaster by car through all our streets, and they aren't local because they're all people creaming off all of our jobs. Sorry to stereotype things so badly, but.
Okay, well, we'll have to see how this argument can be used without steering conflicts. But yeah, just like I was picking up on those trains and asking, are they coal powered? But yeah, I meant diesel powered. So it's diesel trains they'll be using. So, you know, they can't even use the train argument to say be greener, really. I don't think I've had an answer on my question about, was there already planned steps for next steps for the Green Job Summit? I don't know if you want to comment.
So I talked a little bit about that. So the next steps that we took after the Green Job Summit was the letter that we asked people in Cumbria and local organisations to sign, and that was sent off to Boris Johnson's office earlier this year, I think. So those were the next steps. I guess on John's point, I mean the thing about concrete jobs and stuff like that, I don't think that would be any hardship to create, because Whitehaven there's a lot of people who are in fuel poverty in Whitehaven because the houses are poorly insulated and stuff like that, and you know, already things like retrofitting, you could easily create the amount of jobs for retrofitting that would do that job, you know. So
Yeah. So that's something that could be followed up on, and maybe I think, like you mentioned, that Unison and Unite had been involved into the summit, but there may be like a follow-up, maybe like shorter event that we could do at some stage. I guess we probably want to see what's happening with the decision. Is it something that's going to drag on forever, or are we going to be moving to a position that approval has been given, at least for now, or rejected, and there are appeals against those decisions? So I guess that will also dictate us a little bit, what direction we're going. But yeah, I'm keen to find ways of following up on the job summits and involving more trade unions into that. Any other points for so far? Done.
Yeah, thanks, Clara. I'm going to have to go in a minute, but I guess we're generally, I'm not sure what time we're aiming to finish. Anyway, yeah, something that Tony said a few minutes ago. So other than the nearby Tory MP who kind of wised up and changed his mind, you were mentioning, can't remember what, is there a Northern Development Group of like Northern Tory MPs? Maybe I've got the name slightly wrong there, Tony. But I was wondering, because I picked up just today that the Southport MP, Damien Moore, he's been lobbied on Friday, I understand, to kind of just share with him that local climate activists in Sefton don't think it's a good idea, because he's like the only Tory in Merseyside. So I'm just wondering whether there is already a kind of a campaign to, I don't know, raise the issue with the wider set of Tories who, I think, Tony, you said were like in their ignorance supportive of the scheme. Well, those weren't your exact words, but I think that's what you
yeah, thanks, Don. It is the Northern Research Group. They all have lots of research groups. This one it's run by, if you're interested, it's Jake Berry, the MP for Rossendale and Darwin, who's the convener of the research group. And yes, I'm in touch with the Conservative Environment Network, who is, one of the biggest lobbyists of caucuses within the Tory party, who are generally pretty on side on a lot of environment issues. And I'm trying to see what I can do with them, talk to them about what they can do. I'm not going to tell them how to campaign and how to lobby within the Tory party. I'm just trying to nudge them in the right direction and get them to find out what they think it's possible to do, and if we can lend any support to that. So yes, there is lobbying within the Tory party, with the Northern Research Group, and we're doing what we can to try and counter that.
Thank you. Okay. Last point, maybe then from John, and then I'll sort of wrap up the session and, summarize some of the action points.
Maybe we could get a list of the Northern Research Group MPs and find 500 specific jobs in each of their constituencies. And so it's not just 500 jobs in Copeland, it's 500 jobs in each of those other places, in opposition to opening, getting 500 jobs in one mine.
Well, thanks. That sounds like an idea to keep in mind, and definitely under the follow-up on the sort of green climate jobs summit. Okay. Well, I mean, thank you so much for being here. We're going to finish a little bit early because it was a smaller number, so we didn't have to break out into groups and feedback, which is why we're slightly early. You'll be pleased to hear, because I'm sure that many of you have had enough of Zoom meetings if you had some today. So I've taken a few notes, and some next step we've got is there'll be a follow-up with the resources, additional resources to be shared and to be sent to all the attendees and the people who are registered. We're going to consider the idea of running another briefing, and we'll let you know when that takes place. So if you can help publicize it, that'd be great. Obviously, we've got the model motion. So, anything people can do individually to continue to share and push the model motion, but that's something we will continue to work on. If we can have it passed in branches and trade councils, it will help not just this particular campaign, but I think it opens up the debate and the possibility of trade unions being more proactive in opposing fossil fuel projects. Then I've got, can links be made with other sort of re-energized anti-fossil fuel campaign? I think like more locally in the region, and it was particularly mentioned about the threat of fracking. That is a big thing in the area, and they've got large, groups of campaigners who've been really active over the years. So that may be a good idea. And then we also said like some sort of follow-up on the Green Climate Jobs Initiative. I suggest that, if we run a second briefing, there may be other ideas coming up in relation to that. So we can decide the next steps once we have the second briefing. That were I think that were like the key elements to follow up. So that give us something to have for next steps. So now I will thank you again for your attendance tonight. I think it's been a small but productive meeting. And certainly it was great to see, the presentation by Tony and Rakesh. It's been really useful. We've got a recording of that. So, that's a resource we'll be able to share for people not able to attend meetings. So thanks again. And we will be in touch, and I see you soon.
Thanks, Clara. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Have a good
Bye,
evening.
everyone.
Yeah,
Nice to
thanks,
meet you all.
everyone. Cheers.